So my name is Tori Samples, and I am on the product team at SDF, and hopefully you know that you are here at this session. It's going to be a quick one. We'll get into it. So anyone who knows me knows that I have opinions on products, especially when those products are designed for users in emerging markets. But that is not what we're here to talk about today. In fact, we are here to talk about everything else, because as much as a good product can change someone's life for the better, that isn't always given the opportunity. That's often because of some really crappy factors that we don't really talk about. But the good news is that those factors are not necessarily outside of your control. This is a lightning round. I've said I'm going to speak fast. There are no slides, so feel free to catch me afterwards with questions, but this is really more just a chat of things that I've learned throughout the years. I want you to walk away with some tips and tricks to turbocharge your shot at success, because I'm convinced that all of the good ideas don't come from white dudes in San Francisco, and the funding and success shouldn't either. I'm not here to tell you what to build. You are the expert on what your community needs. Instead, let's talk about how to build it so that it stands out against those inevitable power and privilege structures that you're up against. There are a couple things you can do early on to set yourself apart, and a couple more things when you're ready to leave your day job. So let's go through it. We still don't talk in blockchain enough about core business principles. I've known too many great developers who build something really cool as a hobby project, but they don't do the legwork to make it something real. And then they get frustrated when it doesn't go anywhere. So I want you to do two things at the very beginning to set yourself apart and avoid that issue. First, validate people actually need this. Not just you, not just your friend. Don't rely on anecdotes. Force yourself to look at the data. It is your first job to figure out if people actually have this problem. Your second job is to figure out if your solution actually solves it. Spending time on this will help you avoid wasting a lot of time later. The easiest way to validate if people actually have this problem is to talk to potential users, ideally a lot of them. I aim for 100 if it's a consumer product and 30 if it's B2B. You might not hit that, but you'll have a lot more data than you started with. And this work isn't easy, but the easiest way to do it is to go hang out where your users are and keep an open mind. For me, this has meant everything from being led by hand through markets in Congo to taking Uber rides with no destination to talk to drivers, to hanging out in hair salons, to eating at restaurants led by the communities I'm trying to understand, to drinking milk straight from the cow in somebody's living room that I have just met, to spending lots of time in refugee camps. For you, that journey might look different, but the point stands. If you can't do that, there are lots of tools out there to help you. You can Google free user research tools to get started, but I recommend staying as close to users and their pain points as you can during this step, because there's no substitute for getting as close to their shoes as possible at this stage. And right now, at the beginning, you're not looking for which font makes somebody click a button. You're looking for big picture trends. The second thing you can do at the very beginning to stand out is to professionalize early. I know it may seem like a dirty word, but contrary to popular belief, you can professionalize without wasting money or undercutting your startup culture. There are small things you can do to look legit on paper and set yourself apart for investors and partners that don't take too much effort. So here's what I recommend from starting my own company and evaluating a lot of others along the way. Get yourself some basic accounting software. You will thank me later, so you can search, again, free accounting software. Lots of things will come up. Also, don't mix personal and business finances as much as possible. It just screams messiness to investors, and it can create a skewed picture of your actual situation. The second thing you can do to professionalize is to invest in a deck designer. You will send your one-pager and pitch deck 1,000 times, probably more, and looking good on paper sends a subconscious message. Good visuals signal good business. Bay Area bros get away with an ugly deck because people assume that they're too smart or too busy to proofread and make it look good. The rest of us are not afforded that grace. These books are going to be judged by their covers, so make the covers look good. Honestly, though, don't even think of it as a negative thing, because this is your chance to wow. A professional deck is an upfront cost that will definitely pay off later. And then lastly, because you're at a crypto conference, get yourself a relationship with a legal firm. It's a good thing to have a commercial lawyer's contact in your pocket for a number of reasons. You can look for somebody with experience in fintech or blockchain, but definitely in the markets that you're trying to serve. You don't need somebody on monthly retainer. And there are even firms that do pro bono work for startups, especially if there's an impact angle. The point here is to keep yourself safe and communicate that you care about the inevitable legal, regulatory, and compliance things that will come up in this industry. All right, so that's all at the start of your journey. You've got a lot to do. You're going to validate the need, you're going to professionalize early. Now let's talk about what lets you leave your day job. Again, two things I'm going to focus on: communicating effectively and fundraising. Let's start with communication. Communicating effectively is how you get users, partners, advisors, and money. Again, I wish it was how awesome your product is, but that is not really how it works. If you can't explain what your product does effectively, then it's never going to be given the chance to succeed. And this is an area where I can speak from a lot of experience, and maybe not in the ways that you would expect. I know I speak well. I have been a performer my entire life, and my comfort zone is on a stage like this one. That has given me huge advantages. I've worked hard for those, but that still doesn't mean that it's always fair. I've won something like 27 pitch competitions for various projects. Do you think I actually had the best idea or business model for those? Absolutely not. I won over people who were probably more qualified and more deserving because I showed up prepared, looking good, and speaking well. It sucks, but those are the real dynamics behind these things. And so I want you to use those power and privilege dynamics to your advantage. This could be a whole session in and of itself, but let's talk about some common pitfalls that I see founders making, especially in blockchain. Pitfall number one, not being prepared. Yeah, it's basic, we all know, but you need to know your content and deliver it with ease. Knowing your content inside and out is the baseline. Once you've done that, get your delivery to a similar level so that it doesn't kill your shot. Delivery is everything from what you wear to your internet connection to how smooth your voice is to how engaged your face is while you're listening to other people. People judge you on this stuff whether you like it or not. Pitfall number two, abusing metaphors. Everyone is skeptical of hearing the 1,000th Uber for whatever. It's too simplistic and rarely true. Nobody really wants to invest in a product that can be perfectly summed up in 3 words. So, spend time coming up with a good metaphor. Pitfall number 3, finding the right balance between novelty and pattern matching. And what I mean by that is that one interesting or novel thing about a product can be intriguing. It opens the door to conversation. However, more than 2 of those creates a perception of high risk, or it just confuses people. A good example of one novel factor would be taking an existing business model and applying it to a new industry. Bad example would be how I used to start my pitch back in the day, which was, it's blockchain for refugees in Africa on dumb phones using mobile money. Too much. They can't match that to anything that they've seen succeed. So if those are the pitfalls, let's go through a short and sweet list of things that you can do to communicate effectively. Write out your pitch word for word at the beginning, using outline form. I know people don't like doing this, but the simple act of writing it out will help you expose logical flaws, gaps, and where you're unprepared. Practice out loud, practice it in sections. We call these repair points. So make yourself jump around, start at the end, and work yourself backwards from memory. Effective communicators of all kinds do this, from public speakers to musicians and other types of people. Next, record yourself. It is no fun. I cringe every single time I do it still, but there is no excuse. It will pay off 100 times over. And it also helps you get a sense of timing because you need a 30-second version, a 2-minute version, and a 5-minute version. Next, explain your project to random people way before you ever meet with potential partners or investors. I personally like to always go for the aunties and uncles. Even if your product is not for them, they might be on the path to scale. And they don't need to understand how it works. They just need to understand how it makes someone's life better. Lastly, you can use humor to carefully acknowledge people's potential risks in your project or what they might perceive as a risk. In my case, everyone was afraid of introducing the volatility of crypto to a fragile market. So I used to work in a joke to preempt people's concerns. Something like, well, obviously I'm not giving Bitcoin to refugees. And with that, it shows them that you've thought about the risks and you're not stupid. It takes you to a more serious place in the conversation, even though you used humor to get there. So overall, when you're ready to go all in on your project, you need to make sure that you're showing up as best as you can and presenting your product as clearly as possible. Let me pull back the curtain here for a second, because I did all of this when preparing for this talk, right? I wrote it out, I practiced, I recorded myself, I talked through it with people, and hopefully it's helped me communicate better with you today. So that's communication. The second thing that will let you leave your day job is fundraising. This one looks different in blockchain than even other parts of the tech industry. We all know that there's been a lot of dumb money thrown around in the last 10 years, but we're mostly past that, and I think that's for the better. But you need to understand the money part of things so that it doesn't hold you back. People in the US often assume that founders can just finance it themselves or get a loan or get VC funding from the beginning. And that's just not the reality for most founders. So let's think a little more creatively. The fundraising landscape is wider than most people realize. I personally have raised money from, let's count them out, I gotta read this list because it's long, VCs, grant programs, startup accelerators, governments, pitch competitions, universities, in-kind support, crowdfunded donations, credits for different tools, even a t-shirt sale at the beginning. I never had to endanger my personal finances to start my business, and I want you to be able to do the same. It takes a lot of work to cobble together a fundraising path if you don't go the traditional route. But that's okay. I'm convinced, I always tell people that I think grant funding is just as much of a headache as an equity round, even if it is free. The point is, though, that there's often money out there. It comes iteratively, which can actually be nice because it helps you delay the valuation conversation until you have your feet under you. It also helps avoid borrowing money from family, which I never, ever recommend. Most of those creative sources do look for an impact angle, so keep that in mind. But you can actually find a fit with most applications that I've seen, even if your product is not specifically built for impact. Some of those could be specific, like how your product helps women, or it could be more general, like a Blockchain for Good program. So spend time researching those opportunities. It might pay off later. And in my experience, all of these things ask the same 80% of questions. So just create a question bank in your Google Drive and customize that last 20% as needed. Now, all that said, I do have to say the flip side, which is that lots of blockchain foundations, including SDF, have grant programs. And they can be really helpful. They have been for me, even a game changer. But do not chase them as your path to sustainability. They are not a seed round or a follow-on strategy. And no one will take you seriously if that's your entire fundraising game plan. So the last part of fundraising is thinking about your team, because people will probably be your biggest cost and your best resource. This is something that I haven't always done well. Too often, I have hired people I want to work with instead of people who want to do the work. Now, you need people that you can get along with at the beginning, but don't forget that this is still a job. You can mix personal and professional, but I've found that, especially with close friends and family, there's a lot more potential for downside than up. Keep in mind that investors look for diverse teams, along the lines of race and gender especially. So if you're a founder from an emerging market, it probably helps to have somebody from the US or Europe on your executive team. I hate that, but it will probably open doors. People still gravitate towards people that they feel like they can relate to, and a lot of the power in today's world still, unfortunately, lies in Europe and North America. Now, for your builders, I always recommend keeping them as close to your market as possible. It helps them to build if they understand the problem and the context. And in-market teams also are likely going to be more bought in because they've lived it or they know someone who has. So that is your 15-minute primer on everything but the product. We've talked about a lot: validating the need, professionalizing early, communicating effectively, and fundraising. That's a lot, just like taking your project forward from hobby stage is a lot. It can be overwhelming, but remember that there are playbooks to help you. You are not alone, and implementing some tips and tricks can help you level up even when the deck is stacked against you. The world has lots of complex problems that demand nuanced solutions. But once you've found one, don't let these other things get in the way, because you know your product best and the opportunity for it to change the world if given a shot. Thank you. All right.